Key stage 4 ecology topics. Fair few words in this one, right? So let's concentrate. A non-living aspect of an ecosystem: temperature, light, intensity, moisture, wind direction, wind intensity, soil pH, soil mineral, lots and lots of different things. They are abiotic, so not biotic factors. A feature of an organism that increases its chance of survival in its environment. Such features may be behavioural, structural or functional. So if an animal then kind of sort of adapts to a certain thing, like giraffes over many centuries, their necks get longer, that is an adaptation. A type of biofuel produced by anaerobic, so without oxygen decay, in a biogas generator. Okay, biogas. The living component, so we talked about non-living before, e.g. food availability, pathogens, predators and other species. Biotic factor. Okay, think about the words biotic, not biotic. The cycle through which carbon, in the form of carbon dioxide, moves between living organisms and the environment, involving respiration, photosynthesis and combustion. Often what it'll do, it'll start with a cow, that's supposed to be a cow in the middle, right, and CO2 in the atmosphere, trees burning, right, and it's got lots and lots of arrows going all the way around it. That's the carbon cycle. All of the populations of different species living together in a habitat. Okay, lots of different species is a community. When different organisms compete for the same resources, light, water, mates, territory in an ecosystem, this limits the population sizes and stimulates the evolutionary chain. So that is competition. So when animals are competing, right, it's the survival of the fittest, really. Organisms that release enzymes which catalyze the breakdown of dead plants and animal materials into simple organic matter. Okay, so they are then your organisms in the soil that are decomposers, breaking things down. The removal of trees from land which is subsequently used to grow crops or provide space for cattle, deforestation. The spread of living organisms in an ecosystem, it is affected by environmental change, which may be seasonal, geographical or man-made, is the distribution of organisms. When birds migrate or animals in the African savanna migrate to different places, often based on seasons and geographical places. The community of organisms, biotic and abiotic, okay, all combined together, ecosystem. Organisms that can live in extreme environments, so like bacteria that can live in high temperatures or a high salinity or high alkalinity, are extremophiles. Describes the feeding relationships between organisms and the resultant stages of biomass transfer. It takes the form of producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary. The arrow kind of means eaten by, even though it's not quite that. It's a food chain. Ensuring that populations have access to adequate amounts of safe and nutritious food, food security. The gradual rise in average temperatures of the Earth due to increased atmospheric levels of carbon dioxide and methane. Okay, so it's the greenhouse effect that is the blanket going around the outside, and the effect of the greenhouse effect is global warming. The dependence of different organisms on each other for survival. Plants depend on pollinators, herbivores depend on plants. That is interdependence. So it's dependence but interrelated. Very small organisms involved in the recycling materials in an ecosystem. Okay, we talked about those as decomposers before. They return mineral ions to the soil and convert carbon to carbon dioxide, which is released into the atmosphere. Microorganisms. Contamination or destruction of the natural environment due to human intervention, pollution. All organisms of the same species living with one another in a habitat, so same species is a population. Consumers that prey on and eat other animals, predators. Animals that are eaten by predators, prey. Herbivores that consume producers at trophic level 2 of a food chain. So when we talked about the food chain before, okay, it started with a producer, which is trophic level 1, eaten by primary consumer, which is trophic level 2, primary consumer. Then what it does, it goes to secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, trophic level 3, trophic level 4. Photosynthetic organisms, green plant or algae, are the start of the food chains that provide biomass for all living things. Start of the food chain, producer. A square grid of known area used in sampling to determine the abundance and distribution of organisms. Okay, it's a little square, right, that you throw across daisies on a field, quadrat. Carnivores that consume herbivores at trophic level 3 of a food chain. There we go. Secondary consumer. The ability to maintain something for future generations, sustainable. So sustainable fishing is where you catch fish, but then you make sure that there's enough fish then breeding to keep the population up. Carnivores that consume other carnivores at trophic level 4, tertiary consumer. A line along an area used in sampling to determine the abundance and distribution of organisms in the ecosystem. Okay, so it's not a quadrat this time, so this is then the one where you have a tree and you have a line that comes out of it. That is called a transect. The position of an organism in a food chain, trophic level, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. The cycle through which water moves between living organisms' environment, evaporation, transpiration, condensation, precipitation, is the water cycle. Right, there's a fair few words in that. Not that tricky, right? It's just remembering exactly what the sort of the differences between all the kind of the key definitions is. Now what you need to do on a piece of paper is you need to pause the video as it goes through and write your answers into an exercise book. Okay, now do it again and make sure those ones you got wrong, you get right. Okay, well done. Don't forget, write in your diary. Right, do this one again in 2 months' time to make sure all those words are stuck in your head.